Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to speak in opposition to the nomination of Marvin Kaplan to serve as a member of the National Labor Relations Board. Mr. Kaplan has spent much of his career as a staff member in Congress, where he worked to undermine unions and the rights of workers to bargain collectively. A key role of the National Labor Relations Board is to preserve the right of workers to bargain collectively. The board itself is charged with enforcing the National Labor Relations Act, which Congress passed in 1935 in the depths of the Great Depression. The act gave workers the right to join unions, and it encouraged and promoted collective bargaining as a way to set wages and settle disputes over working conditions. This law, passed in the 1930s and still in effect today, is not simply a benefit to workers, it also benefits businesses, and it also benefits the economy. Section 1 of the Act says in pertinent part, quote, "The inequality of bargaining power between employees and employers substantially burdens and affects the flow of commerce and tends to aggravate recurrent business depressions by depressing wage rates and the purchasing power of wage earners." A lot of important words there, that if you have inequality in bargaining power, the findings of the Congress at the time said that would burden and affect the flow of commerce. So that tells you the impact on commerce. It also says when you have inequality of bargaining power, that aggravates business depressions. And the result of that is depressing wages and depressing purchasing power. Now, everyone here knows that when we're measuring the American economy today, and I'm sure this has been true for many generations, but especially today, the consumer plays a substantial role in our economy. So if that consumer, that worker, has lower wages, that's not good for anyone. So giving workers the right to both organize and collectively bargain allows them to demand higher wages, thereby increasing their incomes and that purchasing power, which is so critically important. That in turn, of course, increases consumption and demand for goods, which of course increases production and employment. So all of these are tied together. Wages and benefits affect the economy, not just the worker and his or her family. There's now, I believe, a concerning trend to weaken the National Labor Relations Act and to tilt the board against workers. Mr. Kaplan's nomination is another sign of this disconnect between the rhetoric of the administration claiming to be pro-worker and its actions that are of late anything but pro-worker. The administration claims it's here to support workers, but at every turn, we have nominees who've spent their careers working in the opposite direction. We know that in the 1950s and 60s, the economy worked well for working Americans because 35% of workers were in a labor union. The decline of unions, the decline of the workers' voice, and the decline of collective bargaining has helped to lead us where we are today. Stagnant wages over a long period of time, as well as power and wealth and income, of course, concentrated at the top. So we know that unions helped workers to win higher wages, job security, and unprecedented benefits, including paid vacations, paid sick leave, and pensions. That gave those workers and their families a measure of security, but it also increased their purchasing power, and it also, of course, strengthened the economy. American family incomes grew by an average of 2.8% per year from 1947 through 1973, with every sector of society seeing its income roughly double. We know now, in the last number of years, it's been a different story. Families across Pennsylvania and the United States know that the story is much different. It's not a coincidence that union membership has declined from its peak of 35% of private sector employment in the 1950s to less than 7% of private sector employment today. This is all the more reason to stop this assault on workers and on labor unions. Nominees with a partisan history of working to undermine unions or undermine the National Labor Relations Act or undermine the National Labor Relations Board, those nominees should not be confirmed to a position where they're supposed to act as an arbiter to protect the rights of workers to form a union and to bargain collectively. So I urge my colleagues to oppose the nomination of Marvin Kaplan to the National Labor Relations Board. Madam President, I would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.